Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Radio Row, live from Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, Super Bowl 58. We're very excited today on behalf of Kayla Bradham and myself, Roy Kessel, for Sports Philanthropy Network. We have a very special guest with us today, Al Bernstein. Al is a Hall of Fame boxing announcer. And Al, we appreciate you taking time to come down with us and be on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, this is fun. Super Bowl in my hometown, Las Vegas, and been to many radio rows for Super Bowls, but first is the first one in my hometown, or my new hometown. Chicago was my first hometown.
Well, I know it was a tough year for the Bears, and as you're talking to two Packer fans,
Yeah.
we won't hold that over your head. It's been an interesting time of transition, but you've been around the media world for a long time. You've been around the boxing world for a long time. Tell us a little bit about what's going on from your end right now.
Well, I think the entire media world is going through a kind of an interesting metamorphosis, right? And from in the things that I'm involved with, boxing, that sport is moving more and more digitally. The boxing that I'll likely be working on will be on Amazon, on Prime, where of course there is now NFL football as well on Thursday nights. And so I think sports are starting to make the move to digital, so that those digital platforms are kind of aligned with what they want to do in the future. And because I think the various sports entities know that that is maybe where the ultimate future is. Doesn't mean network television or cable is gone. It just means that things are shifting a little bit, and we see it with all the new media and everything. So it's a different world.
So you've been, you've seen a lot of transitions in the type of media, the way boxing was, right? The historical pay-per-view, the big fights,
Mm-hmm.
everything that's going on now. But one of the things that's always been consistent for you as you've been going through covering that circuit is getting yourself involved in the community. Talk a little bit about what types of causes and in the areas that you've liked to support as you've gone through your career.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the things that we've been actively involved in is a couple of organizations that help get both funding and equipment to amateur boxing gyms around the United States. And that struck me as a very good use of my time, to because I was working with these boxers, announcing them, and amateur boxing plays a very important role. But amateur boxing is not what some people think it is. That it's kind of a minor league that sends people to become professionals. It's not that. It's about helping young men and women deal with life. Lives are changed in boxing gyms all around the United States and, in fact, the world every single day. And so my work with those organizations was not about the professional boxing or anything. It was about helping kids, be better citizens. And the place where I've focused a lot of my time and effort was here in Las Vegas and for Southern Nevada, where my wife and I founded the Caring Place, which is an organization, and it was a facility that helped those touched by cancer. My wife is a cancer survivor. She had stage 4 breast cancer, and amazingly, going through the throes of it, she and her oncologist and us put together a board of directors, and we created this facility that helped cancer patients not with medical treatments, but all the ancillary things that help them, wellness, nutrition, therapy, all of it. It was all in one place, and it was free. And that was something that we founded and ran for about 4 or 5 years. Now it's part of the Nevada Childhood Cancer Society, and they run it, and we of course, are really involved in it. So yeah, we've had, I've tried to choose the things that I can be involved in where I think I can make a difference.
I love it. Al, I'd like to ask you a question if you don't mind. I was one of those 70s babies kids, right? So I grew up on Muhammad Ali and the Junkyard Dog,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's so neat to take a look at boxing and wrestling through the ages. Where we are now, I think certainly we've become a lot more commercialized and to some degree more entertained by sort of the sport of WWE and boxing, but we know it's a very real sport. These athletes are true athletes. Talk a lot about concussions in the wrestling boxing space. I know that you're talking about it. They're advocating for the athletes. What's your take on keeping athletes safe as we get closer and closer with technology in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, the organizations I was talking about also had to do with that, the question of the safety equipment, so that those things didn't happen so much in boxing, especially, and um, the wrestling thing, which is an entity unto itself with all the entertainment and all the high flying acrobatics, brings with it obviously dangers that are go far and beyond, in some ways a different way. In boxing, it's the combat part of it, but I think everybody, I mean, certainly here at the Super Bowl, we know how much the NFL has tried to do to mitigate the potential head injuries of every player that's involved in the NFL. And the same is true in combat sports, whether it's mixed martial arts or boxing. There have been many more restrictions put on things. Fights are stopped earlier. There are they stopped a day of weigh-ins because they felt that was detrimental. Fights were pushed to 12 rounds instead of 15. There have been many safety precautions taken. Now, you can't, in a combat sport, there's only so much you can do. And the same is true probably in the NFL because it is a contact sport. But they've tried very hard to mitigate that. And I think we're going to continue to see the efforts put on that so that, the sport aspect of it remains. And part of it, I know part of it in the NFL for sure, is the people are bigger, faster, stronger, running at very high speeds, and it makes it difficult. And while boxing hasn't essentially changed as a sport, you can make the case that heavyweights, for instance, are, at least that division, bigger than they've ever been. Because of training methods, people can hit harder. So a lot needs to be done and has been done to mitigate these kind of injuries.
So my next question, Al, I know it's controversial. Okay, so I get it. I'm not sure that there's any right answer. I keep trying to study it and really wrap my arms around it. Let's talk about transgender athletes in
Mm-hmm.
contact sports. I know
Yeah.
it's controversial. What is sort of the professional take, and what are you seeing on a very personal level, right outside the ring? Safe, not safe, right, wrong? What's your take?
Yeah, I haven't, it's it's still such in embryonic stages that in terms of combat sports, there's not that much of it happening. Uh, it is an issue. Let me state 100% for the record. I am a person who is completely on board with the rights of transgender people. I absolutely believe they should have the same rights as everybody else, should not suffer um, prejudice in any way. The athletic part of it becomes more tricky, doesn't it? Because there is the chance that because of the nature of their bodies, it's going to be an unfair advantage to women if they are competing against women. I mean, this may seem ridiculously simplistic and overly um, obvious, but I think at the end of the day, transgenders competing against each other makes perfect sense. And again, I'm not a person who is in any way against the rights of transgenders, the LGBTQ community is near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate some of the problems that they have suffered. But I think this is going to be this becomes a political flashpoint. And as always, what's needed is kind of sober thought about it, not overreaction. And trying to get to that sober thought and do it in a way that makes sense is where we always run into problems, don't we, in our society? And I just think we have to find a way to figure out ways to make that work without either endangering some athlete, if it's a combat sport especially, or disadvantaging an athlete in a sport that isn't a contact sport.
So, Al, my final question for you, because you just walked yourself right into this, using things as a way to make things better, right? So, a lot of people in my world, mom, 8 kids, right? Like, oh, I can't believe you'd want your kids to go in and learn how to fight. You're just teaching them to be
Right.
bullies. And my thought is always like, no, I want my kids to understand the sportsmanship that goes into boxing or other combat sports. I want them to understand confidence, self-worth. I want them to be able to defend themselves. I think contact sports do so many good and positive
Yeah.
things, but they still are probably the sport that gets the most rugged,
Yeah.
central city type rap. What have you seen in this realm that you live in of athletes using contact sports for pure sheer greatness?
Yeah, well, there's many layers to that. One of the things is that, I alluded to it earlier. When youngsters go into a gym, wherever it is, whether it's inner city, whether it's somewhere in rural, there are many rural gyms that serve the same purpose, where they're going there and oftentimes seeking something that they can do that will give them self-esteem, that will keep them physically fit, and learn certain values. And most, not all, but most, the vast majority of the coaches working in gyms around America are people that can give them those values. They can help them be better people. Archie Moore, the great Archie Moore, his son, they had a Anybody Can gym in San Diego, in which they have 2 sections in their gym. They have the section where it's a working session with a library, books, desks, places where they come after school, they do their schoolwork, they go right into the boxing gym. And so a lot of it has to do with that aspect of it. And the other part is helping somebody become good at something that may take them to a different place in that sport, or it may just give them the self-confidence and the awareness of how good they can be to help them in another field. And if you create a safe environment in a gym with 16-ounce gloves, headgear, not allowing people to spar that shouldn't be sparring or shouldn't be sparring with the wrong people, it's a very good thing. We've seen many white collar boxing gyms come up, or boxing gyms where they do white collar boxing, because people that are professionals want to get in shape, they want to be a part of it, and under the right circumstances with the right safeguards in place, it's very beneficial. But I have seen many lives changed by the work that's been done in amateur boxing gyms. It's not a cliche, it's a fact.
Well, I think one of the things that we see throughout, right, we're here at the Super Bowl, there's so many different athletes and former athletes that are doing incredible work in their communities. You talked about the lives that are changed, and that's really what we love hearing about. And love to have you tell us a couple of stories firsthand that, from people that you've been around and seen that work for them and really turn their lives around.
Oh, yeah. Well, a number of boxers. I mean, the Erickson Lubin, a fighter who's a 154-pounder, was he and his coach Kevin Cunningham, who have been together for a long, long time, it's a kind of a father-son relationship that was fortified when Erickson was younger. They've been through good and bad times in amateurs and in professionals, and his life changed and altered dramatically when he got into that gym. And Kevin, who is a former policeman in St. Louis, who also had the exact same story with Corey Spinks, Leon Spinks' son, who was needed that kind of guidance and needed that kind of help. And there are dozens and dozens of boxers who found, in some cases, second fathers or the kind of guidance that they needed at exactly the right time. And I interview, before our fights, we have sit downs with all the boxers. So over the years, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boxers. And in many cases, tell me the story of the genesis of what happened to them when they walked into a gym and how it transformed them as a human being. And so it's a very real process.
Yeah, it's incredible when we look around at all the different sports, how virtually every sport is being used in different communities to transform those lives. Yeah. And so it's impressive. I know, as Kayla said, sometimes the combat sports get a bad rap in terms of people thinking that that's not going to carry that same weight and create the same ability for somebody to transform that life. But Al, we thank you for being here. Kayla, do you want to close things out?
Al, thank you so much. On behalf of Roy and I at Sports Philanthropy Network, we want to remind you to live generously. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for being here.